Hey, and good morning, everybody. This is Chris Day, your host for this week's edition of the International Cannabis Conversation. I'm the co-founder of the Global Cannabis Network Collective, and thankful every week to trichomes.com for letting us host this tour around the world of legal cannabis markets and everything that's happening there. Before I really dig into the show this week, I want to thank all of our subscribers who check out the show every week. It has been fun hearing your comments, getting your suggestions on new topics to cover. Please don't hesitate to reach out anytime you see a story, a topic, a person who is making a difference around the world in helping to expand the cannabis conversation. This week, I'm really excited to be able to have on the show a friend and someone that I have tracked for a number of years now in the cannabis landscape. Happy to welcome Douglas Gordon. He's dialing in from the island of Jamaica today. He is the co-founder or the founder of CanEx Jamaica. He's the chairman of Zimmer and Company, and also has a new initiative that we'll talk about near the end of the show that he's also pursuing called Silo Wellness. So, Douglas, thanks so much for joining us today.
Chris, it's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Yeah. It's I know you were up here in the States a couple weeks ago, driving across country. It was nice to talk to you then. It gave us a chance to connect and get this scheduled.
Absolutely.
So thanks for coming on.
No, thanks for having me, Chris. I think it's great what you're doing there. Really broadening the conversation beyond North America and having all these different points of view and updates and what's happening globally. Because this is a global industry, and it's important that we contextualize it as such.
Yeah, absolutely. I spent a lot of time, a number of years focusing on the North American markets, and it's nice, but I think that really the opportunities and what we're doing at ICC is meant to really show that broader perspective and how it all comes together. In the last couple of weeks, we've covered Malta and Sub-Saharan Africa, and we've done some work out of Asia, but we have not talked about the Caribbean. And you can't really talk about the global cannabis markets without touching on what's happening in the Caribbean and what you're doing. So how many years has it been now since you founded CanEx?
So calendar years is 2016, but in dog years in the cannabis industry, I think we're like 20-year veterans. But yeah, no, 2016 is when we got started.
Yeah. Absolutely. And for those who don't know, CanEx Jamaica is a great conference and trade show that you have held every year, with the exception of 2020 for obvious reasons, looking at sort of movements, not only in the Caribbean, but around the world and throughout Latin America as well. What are the plans moving forward as we hopefully emerge out of the pandemic for CanEx Jamaica?
Well, I'm not going to use the word hopefully. I'm going to say when, because we're moving out of this thing. Otherwise, we're
Absolutely.
all conscribed to a not so fun existence. We're hosting CanEx in September 23 to 25 this year at Montego Bay. And, what we do, Chris, like we've pivoted over the years. When we first started, our objective was to provide a global connection to what was happening in Jamaica, to provide investors and business owners, cultivators, scientists, medical community access and connection to people who were actually in the space already globally. So you could have some practical experience combined with some aspirational desires. But we've evolved over time. So now it's we really look at CanEx now as an international conference that takes place in Jamaica. So our conversations, our topics are not sort of anchored in what's happening in the Caribbean, but it allows a really wonderful venue for people to come to and have these conversations and develop these types of relationships. So, going into 2021, we want to really, play that up even more significantly. In 2019, we had 37 different countries represented at CanEx, and that's something that we think is a really strong component of who and what we are. We want to continue to grow in that direction.
Yeah, I love the fact that you've been able to grow it so much. I'm very anxious to join you this year
Good.
in there. I love traveling digitally and talking to everybody, through these virtual platforms, but there's nothing that can quite replace the in-person discussion.
Definitely.
Um, to have a responsible conversation about how it's evolving, I think we should probably let people know the roots from which it came and educate on sort of the relationship with the cannabis industry that exists in Jamaica and throughout the Caribbean, because I don't think everybody really knows sort of what the legal framework and status, the
Sure.
relationship with the plant is.
Sure.
So maybe fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, so in 2015, the Jamaican government decriminalized, possession of cannabis in Jamaica. And at the same time, they introduced legislation to provide for a legal medical framework to regulate the industry. And so, that prompted us to get started and try to be this platform that could connect folks. There's been challenge here because obviously Jamaica has historically the indigenous population, the Rastafarian culture, is very much associated with cannabis and has been involved with cannabis. Let's just be, call it what it is. But the transition into this legal framework, it could have been a little bit smoother, to be honest. There could have been more understanding, concessions, more bridges to sort of say this is how you can participate in the industry. So I think collectively as an industry, that's something that we could have done a bit better. But there's also a huge gap in understanding that the difference between what it was, unregulated, sort of mixed standards, sort of haphazard, if you will, notwithstanding the understanding of the relationship with the plant, notwithstanding the immense expertise in terms of cultivation, notwithstanding the relationship between a lot of these ganja farmers and an understanding of the plant. That's something that now has to be transitioned because, as you appreciate, in a very regulated industry, it's a very different animal, so to speak. So also growing at scale is a very different proposition than growing, in smaller quantities, albeit with, maybe sometimes better quality. So these are some of the nuances that have had to be navigated in terms of the passion that exists in Jamaica for the plant and the practical business realities as we evolve into this regulated space. And so, there has to be give and take on both sides. But I think a big thing that a lot of folks don't appreciate is as much as cannabis is associated so closely with Jamaica, culturally and spiritually and from the music and so forth, the actual population here is relatively conservative. So you have a lot less tolerance, a lot less acceptance than you would actually find in the United States. So, the middle class, upper middle class, that sort of thing, they tend to, I should actually, it's not really a class thing, to be honest. It's just the population overall. You tend to have a slightly more conservative perspective on cannabis use and therefore the industry. And so that's an educational process that also had to come along so people understand the true medicinal benefits of the plant. And then we can sort of get them on board where that's concerned.
Yeah, and through your other company, right? You're pretty actively engaged in that educational process because if I remember correctly, you're in the CBD space. I know I saw some webinars over the last year, really talking about health and wellness benefits. So, is that company primarily supplying the Jamaican market, or are you all exporting, CBD products into other markets?
So, the Jamaican government and through the Ministry of Health, I think what they did or what they intended to do was very good. They wanted to have real control of the products coming into market to ensure a certain standard and quality. And I think that's what's hurt the CBD space in North America in particular is that, people come up with snazzy brands, but the actual product quality is poor. And when you check the testing, it doesn't have half the stuff that it's claiming is in there, et cetera, et cetera. So the fact that all the products had to be approved in Jamaica before they could get into the retail channel, and specifically they were talking now about the pharmacy channel, right? Was a good thing. Its actual implementation has been a bit challenging. It's sort of overly analytical and difficult to get products approved and so forth. So through our distribution company, we were able to get a number of products approved, and we were able to partner with other companies that have gotten products approved so that we could really, go to market with a portfolio of products. Now, be that as it may, importing these products is where we had to start because they didn't have the cultivation, extraction, and the production capabilities in Jamaica to make those products. And that has been slow in coming as well, right? So, it's just part of the journey. But a big part of what we had to do through that distribution company is sit down with doctors, sit down with government officials, and educate them about CBD. Make them understand how the endocannabinoid system works. Make them understand that this is a very natural product inherent in each one of us, and therefore, get them a little bit more comfortable in terms of its properties. So that's been an ongoing journey, and obviously a very expensive proposition. But the reality here is it's all towards the longer play of getting the market sensitized, and then hopefully through the supply channels, being able to bring it in at a more cost-effective price point, so we can get more customers have access to it.
Yeah, this reminds me somewhat of a conversation I had with some companies out of Europe over the last several months. It's this, more pragmatic approach, making sure that you have the quality testing and the substance behind the products on the front end before you go to market. And I think, I don't think, I know you're right. I agree with you that, in some of the North American markets, they build the sizzle first and then the substance on the back end. Not in all cases, but frequently. So I do think it will pay off for you and the markets over time.
Well, I'd be remiss if I let this opportunity slide past me, but that's thanks to marketing experts like yourself who are experts at creating sizzle.
Yeah, I've spent much of my career building brands and that kind of conversation. I have deep appreciation though for brands with substance. It's much easier to sell them.
Absolutely.
So as you're continuing to evolve and shift, I know we've got CanEx Jamaica coming up in September, and we've been building this ongoing testing programs and engaging in the education process. But I've also seen around the world, and I know you're part of this discussion, sort of this broadening of the landscape outside of cannabis and into some other sectors. We cover here the International Cannabis Conversation, but I don't think we can have that conversation as it continues to push forward and expanding without also touching on what a lot of the trendsetters and sort of front guard of the cannabis industry are now working on. You've got this new project, Silo Wellness, that you sent me some information on the other day. But talk to me about how you have been continuing to maintain the cannabis industry, but also now shifting into psychedelics. What's the common ground there?
Well, the common thing is plant medicine. The common thing is, using natural products that are here, in the earth that can help us and truly help us. You have real gaps in treatment on the mental health side, whereby we've accepted a lot of synthetic, products coming from these different pharmaceutical companies, and they're just not effective. You have 30% of all patients who take mental health drugs where it's treatment resistant. You know what I mean? So it's doctors saying, I'm going to continue to prescribe this, not because it's really that effective, but because I don't have alternatives. And so, what the psychedelic movement has facilitated is better understanding of how the plant medicine is affecting mental health, the regenerative properties of, for the neurotransmitters, et cetera, and bring that into, what can actively help people to address these longstanding challenges. But the other part about it, and again, it comes back to cannabis. We go into this I was going to say silo, but no pun intended. This silo that it's medicinal, and we only want to talk about medicinal.
Nice branding,
right? But a huge part of the medicinal or the positive benefit is just the wellness component that it brings to your mind. So it has health properties that we can all sort of, have this very serious conversation around medical. But the reality of it is has a much broader benefit to individuals and society as a whole when we can get to a better place within our mind and our mindfulness and our overall wellness. And so that's what we're looking at with psychedelics. So, Silo operates in a couple of different veins. One is we have wellness retreats. So in Jamaica, we take a very wellness, holistic, mindfulness, sort of expansive approach to your engagement. You come here to go to another level. You come here to get more in touch with your inner power, right? Your inner strength. And so it's very expansive that way. At the same time, we have the ketamine assisted retreats in Oregon, and that's a lot more sort of medically oriented. Where it's led by a properly trained doctor, a psychotherapist. So it's really much more about helping people to work through some of the challenges they've had on that side of things. But Silo, we also have a functional mushroom line, which I think is excellent because this is a part of what was missed with cannabis. The final mile to the customers, I'm sure you can appreciate. How do we give them a product and a brand that's simple to recognize, simple to understand, that they can trust? While we sort of put in front of them these holistic benefits, these health benefits, these wellness benefits. And then finally, we cultivate here in Jamaica mushrooms and psilocybin, and that's an expanding part of our business as well. So we have a few different tenets, and then we also have a nasal spray, which is a very novel patent pending delivery modality, mechanism, which gives us a piece of the IP conversation, if you will, because again, it's this is an early patent, so we're in a very good place where that's concerned. But again, it comes back to how do we get the medicine to patients to help them most effectively, and that's what we're oriented around.
Yeah, I have a deep appreciation for expanding the discussion beyond recreational and pharmaceutical, right? Which is the two buckets that have basically been defined in the common discussion. And it says, well, if it's pharmaceutical, then you're about medicine, and if it's recreational, you're about getting high, and that's it. And in the middle is actually this very robust and important discussion about health and wellness and plant-based medicines. I had a great talk a couple of episodes ago with Abhishek Mohan out of Hemp Street about the applications that they're using cannabis and Ayurvedic medicine to help women, and really looking at pain management and all these things. And it's lost in the politics of these discussions all of the good that plant-based medicine can do, and frankly also all of the supporting research around the world that actually proves it out and says, hey, look, this is something worthwhile to look at. So I love the fact that you're doing it, and I love the connectivity in the discussion, because just having one piece, just having the cannabis conversation, or just looking at psilocybin and not talking about the totality of health and wellness, I think is doing a disservice to the population.
Absolutely.
And the only place that we can have this discussion really is when you're talking about it on the global stage, because each individual country, just touches those aspects that they happen to be comfortable with. So I really think it's a groundbreaking discussion. I've been able to have pieces of it with a handful of people around the world, but you're right. You're in a great position. You're very early in it. And when I saw in the stuff you sent me earlier in the week about the nasal spray, I thought, oh, that's going to do very well. So
we believe so. We believe so.
Yeah.
But Chris, a really important part for us as a company that I'm personally very proud of is that, number one, Jamaica is one of the few places in the world where it's legal, right? So this gives us an opportunity to really, again, sort of take a slightly different approach to what's been achieved in Jamaica. You know what I mean? Where we can be not just market leaders, where people are coming in here, sort of planting a flag, and then they go back to Canada or wherever, and it's no real authentic connection. There's no real actual participation or investment in improving the lives of the people here. I'm not just talking about potential patients. I'm talking about the folks who come work for your enterprise that you can plant your flag. 6 months later, you're out of here, and they have to go find new jobs. We have this opportunity, and I think it's an obligation, if you will, to not just be part of something that's so incredibly important to help people, but also where we can really impact people locally, so they get real expertise, real knowledge. So if at one time in the future they choose not to be with Silo, they know enough about psychedelics that they have a career path. And I think that's incredibly important. When you talk about plant medicine, I think, and as woo-saw as it sounds, I think fundamentally there's something in there about karma. There's something in there about intentions and how you operate. And if we lose sight of that, there's a glad bag of cannabis companies that are testament to the fact that, what they say and what they did were completely opposite things. And, they got taken care of. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and that's what we want to lean into.
Yeah, I agree. I have had a lot of conversations over the last year, and it's growing around, depending on where you're at, we position it as, here we're talking about it, and it's my favorite way, because it's, I think, the most honest, in the context of karma. But whether you call that conscious capitalism, whether you call it impact investing, or karma, this notion that there is a higher purpose than just earning a buck and actually making a positive contribution, is something that I am most enthusiastic about when I work within the cannabis space. And I think it's even more ingrained in the expanding psychedelics movement. Yep. So, kudos to you on that. Because we've exchanged a number of messages offline here, that I'm very enthusiastic to be watching how that continues to grow
Thanks,
in the coming months.
I appreciate it. I would just say as well that to the point you just made, I believe that you actually maximize returns when you're doing it for the right reasons in terms of long-term returns. If you play the short game, then anything can play out. But if you're really doing it with the right fundamentals and foundation in place, there's no reason why in the long term, doing the right thing is not going to deliver outsized returns for all your stakeholders. And I think that's the path that we must walk as we go into this and understand and appreciate and integrate the power of plant medicine into this sort of new world capitalism context that it's not used to.
Yep. No, the very first episode, and we did this intentionally, the very first episode we ever did of the International Cannabis Conversation was all about the cannabis industry as a impact investment and regenerative economy driver, based not only on making money, but also on making a positive social impact around the world in multiple ways. That's what, like, the Global Cannabis Network Collective that we've pulled together as a business, it's what we were all about as well, is finding like-minded companies that will work together to not only drive deal flow around the world, but also drive a responsible, ethical, and sustainable marketplace. Okay. So it's part of why I always love talking to you and working with you when we have a chance, because I think we're like-minded in that sense.
Definitely.
So I know I promised we would keep this short because I know you're a busy guy. I want to thank you again, Douglas, for coming on to the International Cannabis Conversation on trichomes.com. And thank you to everybody out there for continuing to tune in each week. Please don't forget to subscribe, share it with your friends, and help us grow a great, expanding, sustainable, ethical, and responsible industry around the world. Thanks so much, Douglas. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure being here.